Ken died on our 7th wedding anniversary. His belongings were filled with love letters to his first crush, leaving me, his legitimate wife, behind with 10 billion and a mix of emotions. Promotions, a fortune, and a dead husband, 2 bits of good news fell right into my lap. Ken was gone. I was still setting up for our anniversary when the news hit. He drowned himself, Mike, his best friend, told me. He handed me a letter, snapping me back to reality. What are you saying? I can't believe Ken is just gone. We had plans to celebrate our anniversary. We were so in love. How could this happen? I crouched down, bawling, showing all the emotion of a heartbroken widow. Ken's body had already been recovered and was at a funeral home. He wrote a will before he died, leaving us to handle everything. Mike's voice trailed off. I stopped crying, shakily opening Ken's belongings, only to find they were filled with love tokens to Stella. Stella wasn't just anyone, she was my half-sister. The moment I first saw Stella, I knew she was beautiful and gentle, and I couldn't help but fall for her. The pen is the only gift Stella gave me. I've cherished it ever since. Ken wrote those words, confessing his unending love for Stella and his longing to protect her as family if he couldn't as a lover. The date on that diary entry is from when he decided to propose to me. I, with a bright smile, thought I'd landed the best guy around. I continued flipping through the pages, each tear carrying a lifetime's worth of grievances. Then, I found Ken's farewell letter, brutal and straightforward. First, he said his heart and soul belonged to Stella, admitting he'd wasted so many years with me and was finally going to see his first love. Second, he didn't want me involved with anything after his death, not even at the funeral, worried I'd disturb his reunion with her. Lastly, he coldly left me a whole 10 billion. Here's the money, but you'll never have my love, he wrote, with such force that it practically tore through the paper. I cried even more. Let's burn all these for Ken, I managed to say while holding the farewell letter, shaking as I walked away. I had to get out before bursting out laughing. Got promoted, got rich, lost my husband, had 2 major wins on my 27th birthday. System, Ken's finally dead. 10 billion. We did it. System, yeah, soon you'll start a new life. I rolled around in my soft bed. Good thing I got that onion from the system store, or I wouldn't have been able to cry on cue. In public, I played the role to perfection. I discovered the storyline 8 years ago. It was from a novel where Ken was the main character. In his first life, Ken pursued Stella but couldn't get her. He was a nobody back then. Stella married a rich guy, and Ken worked hard, becoming a business magnate. He married me to be closer to Stella. When Stella died unexpectedly, he took his own life too. And I, realizing the loveless marriage, chose depression and suicide, leading Ken to be reborn. Knowing the plot, I had so many questions. Why feel depressed with 10 billion? I didn't want reincarnation, just that money. Being reborn doesn't make you smarter. How am I gonna hustle up 10 billion from scratch? I cried for 3 days straight on my 200 square meter bed. Maybe my resentment was so strong that I summoned the system. It can keep me fixed in this timeline. From then on, I followed the storyline. I played the role Ken needed me to. Worked hard as his backup for 8 years. 8 years. Do you even know what I went through? I excitedly counted Ken's inheritance over and over, thrilled beyond belief at the unexpected windfall. I never thought I'd see Ken again. There he was, spirit form, just as charming as I first fell for him. He murmured, disbelief in his voice, how? Wasn't Sandy supposed to be heartbroken and join me in death? Then I could be reborn and stay with Stella forever. His voice was full of lost dreams and a bit of anger. I am his legal wife and all he talks about is Stella, calling her name lovingly, even in spirit. I pretended not to see his frustration, busy showcasing my grief to journalists in public. Secretly, all I could think was that Ken was indeed quite the moneymaker. True male lead material. What? This building's mine too. What a shame he died early. If not. My thoughts were my own, only the system knew my real self. Everywhere I went, I noticed Ken lingering around. From initial confusion to complete composure. And once waved him off with a middle finger, realizing he was bound to my side. Poor thing, now becoming my new plaything. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to get rid of all Mr. Ken's things?" Wendy asked cautiously. I feigned sorrow, shaking my head. "Ken's gone, and these things only remind me, making me cry again. I don't want to make anyone else sad." With one last longing look, I let Wendy take everything. As she gleefully walked away, I overheard her say, "This watch goes to my boyfriend, and these go on the second-hand market, and this, to my friends. Hardly any of Ken's things were kept by me. I've had a bit of a crush over the past 8 years. After all, Ken only knew how to spoil me with money. He'd give me hundreds of thousands without a blink. I even gifted him an expensive outfit with the first money I earned. Treating it like a treasure, I presented it to Ken. But he barely glanced at it and tossed it in the trash. "I don't want your stuff," he said. "Stella's all I care about." In dreams after that, I realized, maybe Ken should be dead. Now, he floats around angrily questioning, "Sandy, how dare you throw my things away? You washed these clothes for me every night." There was a hint of nostalgia in his tone. After a few days, he seemed to realize I had no intention of joining him in the afterlife and began accepting his death as reality. "And the belt? How could you have Wendy throw it out? It was your gift to me on our 5th wedding anniversary." Ken ranted furiously at Wendy. "Don't you dare sell these things. Do you hear me, Wendy? Wendy." As a desperate expression crossed his face, Wendy left the mansion with a bag full of items. "No." He realized something with despair in his voice. "Stop howling, Wendy can't hear you." I rolled my eyes at Ken. We'd known each other 8 years, been married for 7, and never once did he use the things I gave him. Why act all sentimental now? Lying sprawled on my back, I vented into the empty air. "You can see me. Sandy. How can you be like this?" The gentle, loving Sandy who always forgave Ken was dead. Now, I'm a new Sandy, one who doesn't love him. Was it all an act before? Ken was furious, wanting to hit me, but found he was now just a soul. All he could do was rage. "Actually, let me tell you the truth." I spoke calmly, "Nothing scares me anymore. A soul can't die of anger, right?" After Ken repeatedly said his heart belonged to my sister Stella, I was just there to fill the wife role, so I stopped caring secretly. I even wished he'd die soon. I gracefully declared I didn't want kids, understanding the bond between him and Stella, not wanting to tie him down with a child. Besides, if I became a young, pretty widow, having a kid would be inconvenient. Plus, Ken was so selfish, he'd abandon his wife and company employees for his first love. If those genes passed to a child, it'd be pitiful. Upon hearing my true feelings, his spirit looked dejected and lost in thought. "Then why'd you bring me food every time I was working?" His voice shook slightly. "Oh, that's because I ordered mid-price takeout, plated it nicely. Credit goes to the restaurants and delivery folks. I even tipped them using your money. You never loved me even a bit? How could you not love me?" To maintain the image of a devoted wife, I put in a lot of effort. Bringing Ken meals was a must in my dreams. I was a love-struck fool, doing everything related to Ken personally. But in reality, Ken never appreciated this. He always yearned for excitement outside, never the home's comfort. Realizing this, I started slacking. I'd use instant mix for soup, order takeout for dinner, and have the delivery guy plate it before sending it to Ken's office. Seeing him occasionally flirt with Stella and tell me to leave, he'd shout, "How could you do this to me? I'm your lawful husband." His voice nearly cracked. "You never even once opened the lunchboxes I brought over the past 7 years." I spread my hands, successfully making Ken seethe with anger. I showed him his cremation certificate, cemetery photos, and burial video. "No point getting angry, you're already dead," I said, drawing out the last word. Ken watched his own burial with no trace of me at the funeral, tears falling for some reason. But what did it matter to me? Fake. Still, considering he left me a hefty inheritance, I'd forgive his ghostly grumbling. Sandy, dear, I know losing Ken was hard for you, my dad said, a man who'd always doted on Stella and my mom. Now, he was right in front of me, playing the pity card. I'm sure it wasn't intentional that I left your mom, you know how men are. Even your husband had two-timing habits. For Ken's sake, you'd surely understand, right? As if I'd feel the same for him as I did for Ken. Done talking, Simon? My patience was running thin. He hastily grabbed my sleeve. Since Ken just passed, you probably aren't up to handling the businesses he left. Let me help with that. We're family, after all, he emphasized the word family. Simon stood by the door, greedily eyeing everything inside the luxury home. Sandy, my dear, how about your stepmom and I come stay with you? You won't feel lonely then. Quickly, I pushed him towards the door, bumping into Wendy, who was mopping. Wendy stuck the mop right in Simon's face. Don't you have any manners? Can't you see I just mopped? Drenched with dirty water, Simon was now a pitiful sight. Even Ken, floating around, couldn't stand it. Sandy. How can you have no filial piety? He is your dad after all, and Stella's too. He's Stella's dad too. I can't stand this disgusting mess anymore. I waved Ken's cremation certificate. That cheating Ken is dead. For my mom's peace in the afterlife, maybe you should just drop dead too. With Ken gone, I do what I want without worrying about consequences. I pointed fingers at Simon from my moral high ground. You think you can manage the estate? Look at the mess you made of the company after Mom passed. Projects losing money one day, branch offices closing the next. And I hold his news in his face like a sword. You can't even handle the little things, and you want to save the company? Maybe bankruptcy is just what you need. My dog has a spare bowl, Wendy can pack it up for you. Ken also checked out the new Stella had him wrapped around her finger before. Simon asked, and Ken gave, a big invisible sucker. Now Ken, in death, sees and hears things clearer. He closed his eyes. You're right, it's over for the company. Simon never had a knack for business. His only luck was stumbling upon my mom early on. He thrived later by riding Ken's success. Other businesses joined in, thanks to Ken. I'm not giving any money, and as for shares? Forget it. Weren't you just singing about true love with Stella's mom? Thinking of Simon's betrayal to this family makes my fists clench. Well, rich or poor, she's going to stick with you, right? After letting loose, sarcasm became my thing. Simon was so frustrated. Didn't even make it past the door before I called security. I even ordered that Simon and his crowd aren't allowed in without my say-so. Why so harsh on your dad? Ken sighed. I pointed around the house. Mine. Stay out of it. Got it? I went to Ken's company. No, it's my company now. Started some major changes right away. Ken was fuming, cursing as he followed me around. I mean, Ken quickly went from a nobody to a hotshot businessman. Not just because he had that leading man vibe. He squeezed the life out of his employees, really. While he dined with Stella, staff missed lunch. He spent millions on fireworks for Stella but never saw fit to bump up salaries. Sandy. How could you? It's my company. Mine. How could you wreck it? He yelled all he wanted, didn't really matter. What, you can do it but can't handle the talk. I took Ken to the storage room next to the CEO's office. This place housed everything related to him and Stella. That photo was young Stella with Ken. That couch, a match for Stella's. Plus so much more, all linked to Stella. Once Stella was married, and felt down. Ken would say, pause the meeting, I'm going. Be it home or office, Stella was number one. Even if he was just like a brother to her. Everyone at Goes knew he didn't care for me. Rumors were free-flowing. I just faced it all nonchalantly, showing him let him feel the cuts and bruises. If I didn't only love money. Seeing his and Stella's bond would have broken my heart. Ken covered his face in agony. How did things turn out like this? Under my guidance. The company grew, even better than when Ken was around. Silence. Just silence. Sandy, now, please save your dad. Simon ambushed me in the parking lot. Looking nothing like he did a month ago, full of himself. Our company thrived while cutting ties with his. Simon grew weary. Another man stood by him. Before I could toss them out, Ken started yelling. Eyes red, veins bulging. Sandy, grab that guy. He's the one who drove Stella to her death. For the first time, he showed me pleading eyes. Please, Stella was doomed by that guy. Once word of Stella's wedding broke, Ken went on a bender. When Stella's death hit, he shut himself in for 3 days, not eating or drinking. After getting out, I beat Stella's ex-husband, William, until he was bleeding from the head. I almost ended up in jail after that. All I wanted was to find the right moment to do a Romeo and Juliet thing with Stella. Ken was furious and said William, the rich brat, was almost bankrupt. That's why William teamed up with Simon to approach me, the newly rich lady. What did you say? Marry William? I was so shocked I almost dropped my jaw. Simon acted as if nothing had ever happened and took on a fatherly role. Sandy, I know you're hurting since your husband passed, but life moves on, right? Your sister isn't around anymore, and wasn't Dad thinking it'd be nice for you to meet someone, too? If you marry William, we'd still be one big family. Their eyes lingered on my car. To be honest, the high-end car Ken left behind could make a guy like Simon earn for a good 10 years. I immediately slapped Simon and didn't spare William either. I'd waited long enough to enjoy a happy, rich life, and I wasn't going to let these two ruin it. Sandy. Could you be more understanding, like your sister? Back in the day, your sister was all over William. Simon lectured me with that parental tone. Ken, silent for a while, then roared, impossible, impossible. Stella told me she was forced to marry William, and it wasn't her choice. When Stella and Ken first met, Ken was just an unknown broke guy. William had already made a name for himself on the city's millionaire list. As if answering Ken's question, Simon started playing a video. It showed a really dim room. Rich guys like Ken definitely knew what kind of place that was. Sitting next to William was Stella in a low-cut dress, looking all flirty. William's hand was even on Stella's waist, and she didn't seem bothered at all. No way. No way. Ken shouted, not believing it. He had always pictured Stella as a beautiful, considerate woman who, though married to another, still had him in her heart. Simon's words hit him hard. She said she still had feelings for me, but only held back because she was thinking about my future. She said I was the only man she ever loved in her life, and that she was about to divorce William to marry me. Ken floated around in anger. He would float in front of William trying to scare him or over to Simon to learn more about this ex-father-in-law. Honestly, Ken should be thanking me. In that nightmare of his, it took him a long time to discover who his first love really was. Now, only 3 months after his death, I revealed the truth. William, with a creepy smile, said, "So, what do you say? Give it a thought." He couldn't stop staring at my car. Simon looked at me expectantly. For our family, just agree with Dad. In response, a belated bodyguard slapped him hard. Not only that, but I also called the cops, getting this creepy William sent away. William had been watching Stella and Ken's interactions closely, taking photos to blackmail her into not divorcing him. Ken, caught in this push and pull, felt so tortured he nearly tried a double suicide. Simon, that piece of work, was just trying to use his daughters to make money. I had him taken away, too, for tax evasion. Finally, my world was quiet. Since then, Ken, or rather Ken's ghost, had looked all worn out. His first love had crashed, the company wasn't his, and he wasn't alive anymore. What have I been doing my whole life? He furiously demanded I dig up his ashes and move them somewhere else. He didn't want anything to do with Stella, now or ever. But you left a will saying not to let me handle your final affairs, right? Your buddies wouldn't listen to me, you know, I said lazily. You might as well visit them in a dream. Unable to sleep at night, he'd howl in the villa. Sandy. Sandy. I was wrong. I was wrong. Can you get me a Taoist priest? I want to come back to life. I don't want to be a ghost, I don't want to be reborn. In the end, this grown man sat sobbing at the foot of my bed, hugging his knees. I promise to make it up to you if I live again. I shouldn't have been such a jerk before. There wasn't a ripple in my heart. It reminded me of those nights with a high fever when he left me without hesitation for Stella. In the end, I dialed 911 for myself. From that moment on, I knew it was fair to use him. I flashed him a brilliant smile. Sure thing. Word quickly spread in the circle that I was looking for a Taoist priest. Everyone advised me that the dead couldn't come back, telling me to mourn properly. But I stuck to my devoted persona. How can you say that? I just believe Ken can come back. He's never appeared in my dreams, so he must still be alive. Please, introduce me to a Taoist priest. I'm willing to pay any amount, just to see Ken one more time. Every meeting with someone led to more crying on my part. Luckily, the onions I brought worked wonders, and my tears flowed. Ken, floating around, could only see my perfect teary 45-degree angle. He felt even more guilty. When I come back to life, I won't let you down, Sandy. With my constant laments, the emotional persona I crafted grew even more intense. In a city, I was the walking epitome of a devoted widow. Some ladies, seeing my distress, even handed me several projects, hoping to distract me. My eyes widened in realization. No wonder those city CEOs leaned into the emotional widower persona, especially after their wives passed away. There's a profit to be made. Early birds get the worm. Perseverance paid off. A Taoist offered himself up. Ken felt hope for the first time. Really? Am I finally done being a ghost? I didn't find any trace of your husband inside, ma'am. Please accept my condolences. I covered my face to keep from bursting into laughter. I'm right here. How can he not see me? I'm a fully grown ghost. How can he not see me? Find another one. The next Taoist will definitely work. Ken frantically protested in front of the Taoist. I pretended to comfort him. It's okay, we'll find someone else, keep looking. But each visit left Ken disappointed. There were even some outright scammers. You shameless people, I wasn't even at the place you mentioned. They're all just trying to scam money, get lost. He yelled wildly, while I just watched him. Time after time, his hope rose and then fell into despair. How delightful. As seasons changed, Ken became utterly beaten down. He could only follow me passively. For the first time, he realized. His wife, whom he had always taken for granted, had such capability. She could manage the company smoothly without him. Arrange her life effortlessly without him. It was Stella who charmed us with lies, or else it would be us warmly dining at the table together. You cooking for me, me taking photos. That must have been beautiful. Your food must be delicious. Ken started dreaming again. But I ruthlessly shattered it all. Did someone force you to like Stella? Did someone make you leave and comfort her repeatedly? Now you're blaming everything on a dead person. How pathetic. You're about to make the dead rise from anger. Idiot. Ken, being such a scumbag, will never see his own faults. You want me to cook so you can take photos, aren't you something? Is the entire family too poor to hire a housekeeper or what, filthy thing? I waved my hand, refusing to look at Ken any longer. In my dream, I truly did as he wished. I meticulously managed everything at home for him. He was picky, so I learned his dietary preferences from friends and family. Whatever he liked or disliked, I noted it all down. I coordinated his outfits perfectly. Whenever he needed something, I had it ready hours in advance. Sadly, his eyes only ever followed Stella. Worse still, he approached me for Stella. He married me just to become part of Stella's family, but I fell for him, giving him my all. Thankfully, I had this premonition. So Ken, you might as well just die. Leave me the inheritance. Fortunately, heaven heard my wish. I'm now a wealthy woman worth 20 billion. When the news of Simon's release came, I was assessing a new project. Hearing it, I quickly called security, bodyguards, and the loud neighbor to watch the scene. May. Is this how you treat me? When Simon unlocked the door. His new fling, May, was stripping the place of anything valuable. He rushed up quickly, slapping May. How could you do this to me? Every day I worked hard for this family. How could you betray me? He hit her again and again. An unaware passerby tried to intervene but was pulled back for some neighborly gossip. You know, this guy's no good. His wife hadn't been gone long before hooking up with this woman. This mistress has lived in that house for years. The original kid had it rough, and this mistress had her own kids too. I heard they're about the same age as the first wife's kid. And here's the juiciest part, let me tell you. The neighbor's gossip drowned out the two of them. May, watched by so many eyes. Furious, she fought back. Well-maintained nails swiping at Simon's face. You won't even take a good look at yourself, with that beer belly, who'd be interested? If you weren't rich and didn't have Ken, the rich son-in-law, who'd be with you? In her fervor, May even spat at Simon. Now you've had a stint in jail too. We're not even legally married. Take these as compensation. She deftly retrieved some hidden jewels from under the floor. Kicked him, and left. Daughter. You're all I have now. Only you can help Dad. Simon clutched his stomach, approaching me. The generous neighbor quickly pulled me into protection. Your dad's an old fox, don't fall for his tricks. He's trying to con you into supporting him, might even sell you off for a dowry. Yeah, don't go over. To my surprise, I was met with a wave of kindness. As for Simon, after this shocking episode, he showed signs of madness. Constantly mumbling about how he once had a considerate wife and a cute daughter. But he lost them all. I had him sent to a mental hospital. Perhaps this would be our last encounter in this lifetime. As for May, I wouldn't let her off easy either. All those years of money she took from Simon. I got it all back. I glanced at Ken floating in the air. Now he was at his weakest as a ghost. So, I'm just as crappy as your dad, huh? He wept bitterly, but I didn't want to hear his nonsense. I summoned the long-watching system. Completely erased his soul from this world. Goodbye, Ken. Ever since I knew of Ken's soul's existence, every day I was on edge. Afraid that one day, this ghost would mysteriously come back to life. Losing the billions I acquired. Luckily, the system told me that crushing his spirit repeatedly could completely destroy him. So I took Ken on a tour. Thankfully, now everything is back on track. Everything I despise in this world is gone. What's left is a world of love and peace. All is well. As for the epilogue, scumbags don't deserve it.